I've always been a light sleeper. It's one of those things you pick up after years in a quiet suburb, where the nights stretch out like empty highways and every creak in the house feels personal. But that sound, the soft, deliberate click of a latch, started pulling me awake around 2:17 a.m. every night. Not a slam or a bang, just that quiet release, like someone testing if the door was locked. And it was coming from inside my own home. My name's Elena, and I live alone in a 2-story colonial on Elm Street in Willow Creek, Ohio. It's the kind of place where the houses all look alike, with white picket fences and lawns mowed on Saturdays. I bought it 5 years ago after my divorce, figuring the space would help me breathe again. The house was a fixer-upper, but I liked the charm. The wide front porch, the bay window in the living room, and that old oak tree out back that shaded the yard in summer. It's not fancy, just comfortable. I work from home as a graphic designer, handling freelance gigs for local businesses, so my days are spent at the kitchen table with my laptop, a mug of coffee going cold beside me. Evenings I walk the dog, Max, a scruffy mutt I adopted from the shelter, or grab takeout from the diner on Main Street. Routine keeps me steady. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the wind. We'd had a storm rolling in from the lake that week, the kind that rattles the gutters and makes the lights flicker. I was in bed, scrolling through emails on my phone, when the clock on my nightstand blinked to 2:17. Then, that click. It echoed faintly from downstairs, sharp enough to cut through the hum of the AC. I sat up, straining to listen. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no rush of air. Max lifted his head from his spot at the foot of the bed, ears perked, but he didn't bark. After a minute I convinced myself it was the settling of the house, those old beams contracting in the cool night air. I turned off the light and went back to sleep. The next night it happened again. Same time, same sound. I was drifting off when the digital glow of the clock caught my eye. 2:17. Click. This time I slipped out of bed and padded to the top of the stairs. The hallway was dark, the kind of black that swallows shapes, but I could make out the familiar outline of the banister. I waited, heart picking up a little, but the house stayed silent. Downstairs, the front door was latched, the back one bolted. I checked them both the night before, out of habit. Max trotted down ahead of me, sniffing at the air, but he didn't seem bothered. I flicked on the kitchen light, poured a glass of water, and told myself it was nothing. Houses make noises. That's what everyone says. By the third night, I was paying closer attention. I'd left my bedroom door open, the one that leads to the hall, so sound could travel. Sure enough, at 2:17, there it was. Click. Louder this time, or maybe I was just tuned in. I grabbed my robe and crept downstairs, flipping on the living room lamp as I went. The space looked normal, couch pillows fluffed, remote on the coffee table where I'd left it, mail stacked neatly by the door. But as I stood there listening, I noticed something off. The door to the basement. It was ajar, just an inch or two, enough for a sliver of darkness to peek through from below. I hadn't gone down there in weeks. The basement's mostly storage, boxes of holiday decorations, my ex's old tools I never got around to selling, a washer and dryer that hums like an old friend. The door's a heavy wooden thing, painted white to match the trim, with a simple brass knob and a latch that sticks if you don't jiggle it right. I always keep it closed. It's one of those habits from living alone, sealing off the unused parts of the house. But now it hung slightly open, as if someone had nudged it and walked away. I pushed it wider, peering down the stairs. The bulb at the bottom was off, casting everything in shadow. "Hello?" I called softly, feeling ridiculous even as I said it. No echo, no response. Just the faint drip of the dehumidifier I'd installed last summer. Max hung back at the top of the stairs, whining once before retreating to the kitchen. I flipped the switch. Nothing happened. The bulb must have burned out. I made a mental note to replace it in the morning and shut the door firmly, testing the latch. It caught with a satisfying snick. Back in bed, I lay there staring at the ceiling, the digital numbers on the clock ticking past 2:30. Sleep didn't come easy. The days blurred after that. I threw myself into work, tweaking logos for the hardware store on the corner and the bakery that does those apple pies everyone raves about. Mornings, I'd walk Max down to the park at the end of the block, waving to Mrs. Harlan as she watered her roses. She's lived here forever, knows every story about the neighborhood, the time the flood washed out Route 42, or how the old mill closed down in the 90s. I didn't mention the door to her. What would I say? That my house was playing tricks on me? Instead, I focused on the normal, grocery runs to the IGA, evenings with a book on the porch as the sun dipped behind the hills. But the nights were different. On the fourth night, I set my phone alarm for 2:15 just to be ready. When the click came, I was already sitting up. It was unmistakable now, originating from the basement door. I hurried down, turning on every light switch I passed. The door was closed, relief washed over me, but as I reached for the knob, I hesitated. Why would it open on its own? A draft. The house wasn't that drafty. I'd caulked the windows myself last fall. I opened it, descended the stairs with my phone's flashlight beam, cutting through the gloom. Everything seemed in place, boxes stacked, shelves undisturbed. Except one of the toolboxes on the workbench looked shifted, like it had been pulled forward an inch. I touched it. Cool metal, no warmth from recent handling. Dust motes danced in the light as I shook my head and climbed back up. By the fifth night, doubt had settled in like fog off the river. I checked the latch during the day, even oiled it to make sure it wasn't faulty. The house was still, the suburb outside hushed under streetlights that buzzed faintly. At 2:17, click. I was waiting in the living room this time, a cup of tea cooling in my hands. The basement door eased open slowly, not with a bang but a gentle swing, as if invited by an unseen breath. No one there. Just the yawning mouth of the stairs, leading down to whatever waited in the dark. I stood frozen, the steam from my tea curling up like a question I couldn't answer. Why this door? Why every night? And why did it feel in that moment like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to step inside? I didn't go down those stairs that night, not the fifth night or any after. Instead, I backed away from the basement door, watching as it hung there, open just enough to mock the silence. My tea had gone cold in my grip, the mug trembling slightly as I set it on the side table. Max was nowhere in sight. He'd tucked himself into his bed in the laundry room, as if he knew better than to linger. I reached out, fingers brushing the edge of the door, and pulled it shut. The latch caught, but it felt tentative, like a promise that wouldn't hold. Upstairs, I double-checked the locks on the windows, the back door, even the one in the powder room off the hall. Everything secure, or so I told myself. Sleep was a lost cause after that. I lay in bed with the covers pulled tight, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan's lazy spin. The clock's glow painted the room in faint red numbers, ticking toward dawn like a countdown. By morning, the unease had dulled to a low hum, the kind you push aside with routine. I brewed coffee stronger than usual, let Max out into the yard where he chased squirrels under the oak tree. Work waited, revisions for a real estate flyer, the kind that showed smiling families in front of houses just like mine. I stared at the screen, but my mind wandered back to the door. Why the basement? It wasn't even a place I used much. No ghosts in the family history, no dark secrets buried in the foundation. Just an ordinary house in an ordinary town. Willow Creek doesn't change much. It's the sort of suburb where the biggest news is the annual fair at the county grounds, or when the power line's down after a heavy snow. I drove to the hardware store that afternoon, the one with the flickering neon sign that's been there since the 70s. Mr. Ellis, the owner, nodded as I browsed the aisle for a new latch, something sturdier, with a deadbolt maybe. "House giving you trouble, Elena?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. I shrugged it off, said it was just the old wood settling. He chuckled, told me about the time his own place groaned like a ship in a storm after the '08 flood. "These colonials, they talk if you listen," he said. I bought the latch and a pack of bulbs for the basement light, but as I paid, his words stuck. Talk. Was that what it was? The house trying to say something? Installing the new latch took longer than expected. I had to drill into the frame, the bit whining against the wood like a distant echo of that click. By evening, it was done. Solid brass, with a key lock I tested twice. Satisfaction settled in, a small victory against the growing doubt. I rewarded myself with takeout from Rosie's diner, a turkey club and fries, eaten at the kitchen table while the sun slanted through the windows. Max begged for a piece, his tail thumping steadily. Normal. That's what I clung to, these small anchors in the day. Night fell soft, the streetlights humming outside like a lullaby. I set the alarm again, but this time I didn't wait downstairs. Instead, I sat in the armchair by the bedroom window, a blanket over my knees, watching the clock. 2:15. My pulse quickened, a quiet drum in my ears. Max curled at my feet, breathing even. 2:16. The house held its breath with me, the only sound the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hall that I'd inherited from my mum. 2:17. Nothing. No click. Relief flooded in, warm and unexpected. I waited another 10 minutes, ears straining, but silence reigned. Maybe the new latch had done it. Maybe it was all in my head, amplified by too many late nights and not enough company. I went to bed feeling lighter, the kind of tired that pulls you under quick. Dreams came in fragments, driving down Route 42 at dusk, the road empty except for shadows flickering in the rear view. Waking at first light, I stretched, sunlight filtering through the curtains. The house felt different, quieter, as if it approved. Downstairs, the basement door stood firm, the new lock gleaming. I even ventured down with a fresh bulb, screwing it in while Max poked his nose into the boxes. Everything as it should be, no shifted tools, no odd drafts. I spent the day productively, wrapping up the flyer project and emailing it off. By afternoon, I walked to the park, the air crisp with the hint of fall. Leaves crunched underfoot, and I nodded to the joggers looping the path, life moving forward. But that evening, as I washed dishes, a chill crept in. Not from the window, I'd closed them all, but from somewhere deeper. I dried my hands and glanced at the basement door, still shut, still locked. Yet, as I passed it on my way to the living room, I swear I caught a whisper of air, cool and fleeting, brushing my ankle. I froze, turning back. The latch was secure, no gap. Imagination, I thought. The AC kicking on. I settled on the couch with a novel, the pages turning under the lamp's glow, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway. 2:17 came while I was half dozing, the book slipping from my lap. No click this time, but a different sound. Fainter, almost imagined. A soft scrape like fabric against wood from below. My heart stuttered. I sat up, listening hard. It came again, deliberate, pausing, then repeating. Not the door. Something inside. The basement. I approached slowly, key in hand, the metal cold against my palm. Unlocking it felt wrong, like inviting trouble, but curiosity won. The door swung open with a creak from the hinges I hadn't oiled. Light from the kitchen spilled down the stairs, illuminating the top step. I flipped the switch. The new bulb flared to life, chasing shadows from the corners. The space looked unchanged at first. Boxes, shelves, the washer silent. But as I descended, phone in pocket just in case, my foot caught on something. Not a tool or a cord, but the edge of a rug I didn't remember laying down. It was an old throw, frayed at the corners, positioned oddly at the foot of the stairs, like it had been dragged there. I knelt, lifting it. Beneath, the concrete floor was unmarked, but a faint outline lingered, as if something heavy had rested there once. A safe. No, The house plans I'd seen at closing showed none. I stood, unease coiling tighter. Turning to leave, my eyes caught the workbench. The toolbox wasn't just shifted now, it was open, the lid propped at an angle. Inside, the drawers were ajar, contents neatly arranged but exposed. As if someone had looked, searched, then left it that way. Upstairs, I locked the door again, double-checking the bolt. Max whined from the couch, sensing my tension. I paced the kitchen, phone in hand, debating who to call. The police? For what? A door that used to open and a rug that appeared? They'd laugh or worse, suggest I see someone. A therapist in town handled anxiety cases, but I wasn't anxious. I was aware. The house wasn't right. It was watching, waiting, revealing pieces in the quiet hours. That night I didn't sleep in my bed. I stayed downstairs, lights on low, ears tuned to the dark. Dawn broke without incident, but the questions lingered, heavy as the fog rolling in from the river. What was down there that needed hiding? And how long until it decided to show me? The days started to stretch, each one folding into the next like the endless loops of fog that clung to the riverbanks in Willow Creek. I woke that morning, technically after a few fitful hours on the couch, with sunlight slicing through the blinds, painting stripes across the living room floor. Max was already up, pawing at the back door for his morning routine. I let him out, watching as he bounded into the yard, oblivious to the weight pressing on my chest. Coffee helped, black and strong, but it couldn't wash away the image of that rug or the toolbox's open drawers. I avoided the basement door entirely, treating it like a fault line in the house's foundation. Work became my refuge, or at least I tried to make it one. I had a deadline for a local realtor's website redesign, pulling stock photos of cheerful homes with manicured lawns and families waving from porches. It was ironic, staring at those images while my own walls seemed to close in. I emailed back and forth with the client, a guy named Tom from the agency on Main Street, suggesting color tweaks to make the site feel more welcoming. He replied quickly, enthusiastic, as if the world outside my windows was as straightforward as a pixel palette. By noon, I'd finished the mock-up and hit send, then closed the laptop with a sigh. The quiet rushed back in, broken only by the distant hum of a lawnmower from down the block. I needed answers, something concrete to pin this on. The public library in town was small, tucked between the post office and a coffee shop that sold scones baked fresh every morning. I drove there after lunch. The streets lined with maple trees, just starting to turn gold at the edges. Willow Creek's library smelled of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where retirees flipped through newspapers and kids hunted for chapter books. I asked the librarian, a woman with silver hair pinned back and glasses on a chain, if they had records on older homes. She nodded, directing me to the local history section, yellowed binders full of clippings from the Willow Creek Gazette, plat maps from the county archives. I spent hours there, cross-legged on the carpeted floor, pulling out files on Elm Street properties. My house dated back to 1923, built by a carpenter named Harlan, coincidentally the same last name as my neighbor. No scandals jumped out, no murders, no disappearances, just mundane notes about renovations after the big freeze of '47 or a new roof in the '80s. The basement was mentioned once, in a permit for the foundation pour, described as standard crawl space expanded for utility. Nothing about hidden compartments or odd features. I photocopied a few pages, the machine whirring like an accusation, and checked out a book on Victorian architecture, though my colonial wasn't quite that old. Driving home, the stack of papers on the passenger seat felt like evidence, or maybe just more questions. That evening, I forced myself to eat. Leftover fries from Rosie's, microwaved and soggy. Max sat at my feet, eyes hopeful, but I barely noticed. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the kitchen window, and I found myself glancing at the basement door every few minutes. It stood there, unassuming, the new lock glinting under the overhead light. I tested it again, key turning smoothly, the bolt sliding home with a solid thunk. Satisfied, I headed upstairs for a shower, the hot water pounding away the day's tension. But as I toweled off, a thought nagged. What if it wasn't the door itself? What if the sound was something else, mimicking it from deeper in the house? Night came on schedule, the suburb settling into its hush. Streetlights flickered on along Elm, casting pools of yellow on the sidewalks. I skipped the alarm this time, opting for a glass of wine on the couch instead. Something cheap from the IGA, tart on the tongue. Max dozed nearby, his snores a steady rhythm. The clock in the hall chimed 10, then 11. I flipped through channels on the TV, settling on a documentary about unsolved mysteries in the Midwest. Crop circles in Indiana, lights over Lake Erie. It was background noise, a way to drown out the silence, but the stories mirrored my own unease. Ordinary places turning strange without warning. 2:15. I muted the TV, the room falling quiet, except for the faint buzz of the refrigerator. My wine glass sat half empty on the coffee table, condensation beading on the side. 2:16. The air felt thicker, charged, like before a storm rolling in from the lake. Max stirred, lifting his head toward the hallway. 2:17, no click this time, no latch giving way. Relief edged in, tentative, but then it came. Not from the door, but from inside. A low murmur, like voices filtered through water rising from the basement stairs. Indistinct, overlapping, as if a radio had been left on low down there. I froze, straining to make out words. Every night. Waiting. Or was it? The sound warped, fading into the hum of the house's settling. Heart hammering. I grabbed the key from the hook by the door, fumbling it into the lock. The bolt resisted for a split second, stuck, then released. I pulled the door open, the hinges sighing softly. The bulb downstairs glowed steady, illuminating the steps. No one, no movement, but the murmur persisted, faint now, echoing off the concrete walls. I descended slowly, each step deliberate. The wood creaking under my weight. At the bottom, the air was cooler, carrying a musty tang I hadn't noticed before, like damp earth after rain. The rug was still there, folded neatly now, as if someone had tidied it. The toolbox sat closed on the workbench, drawers flush. The sound seemed to come from the far wall, behind a row of shelves stacked with paint cans and forgotten linens. I moved closer, pushing a box aside, dust puffed up, tickling my nose. There in the corner was a vent, an old heating grate, rusted at the edges, half covered by a cardboard flap. I knelt, peering through the slats. Darkness beyond, but the murmur trickled out clearer. The door opens. See it. My skin prickled. It wasn't voices, not really. More like wind through cracks, shaping itself into suggestion. Or was it? I pressed my ear to the metal, the cold biting into my cheek. The sound shifted, repeating my name. Elena. Every night. I jerked back, scrambling to my feet. The basement spun for a moment, the shelves blurring. Imagination, exhaustion, it had to be, but as I climbed the stairs, the murmur followed, a whisper chasing me up. I slammed the door shut, locked it, leaned against the wood until my breathing steadied. Upstairs, I checked the thermostat. The vents were closed, the system off. No drafts, no explanations. Max watched from the living room, eyes wide, as if he'd heard it too, but chose silence. Sleep evaded me entirely that night. I sat by the window, staring out at the empty street. The neighbor's porch light, the only glow. Willow Creek slept on, unaware, its routines unbroken. But mine were fracturing, piece by piece. By dawn, the house was still again, the basement sealed like a secret. I called in sick to my next client meeting, claiming a headache. Truth was, the real ache was deeper, a doubt burrowing in. What if the house wasn't just old? What if it remembered things I didn't? Tenants long gone, moments etched into the walls. And if it was speaking, why to me? Why now? The questions looped, endless as the river, pulling me under as the sun climbed higher. The fog clung to Willow Creek like a second skin that morning, muting the world outside my windows to greys and whites. I hadn't slept. Not really. Just dozed in fits against the armchair, the blanket twisted around my legs like a restraint. Max padded over at some point, nudging my hand with his nose, his warmth a small anchor in the chill that had seeped into the room. The basement door loomed in my mind, that vent whispering secrets I couldn't quite grasp. By the time the sun burned through the haze around 9, I was up, brewing tea instead of coffee, something herbal to steady the nerves without the jolt. I avoided the stairs all day, sticking to the upper floor where the light felt brighter, more honest. My laptop stayed closed, no work today, no distractions. Instead, I paced the hallway, phone in hand, scrolling through contacts without dialing. Who could I tell? My sister in Cleveland. She'd worry. Drive down with casseroles and questions I couldn't answer. Or Tom from the realty agency. He knew the neighborhood history from selling half the houses on Elm. But admitting this felt like cracking open the facade I'd built since the divorce, the independent woman with her tidy colonial and her loyal dog. No, I'd handle it myself. That's what Willow Creek folks did, kept things close until they had to not. Lunch was a half-eaten sandwich at the kitchen table, the basement door in my peripheral vision like an uninvited guest. I stared at it, willing it to stay shut. The lock's gleam, a fragile promise. Afternoon dragged, the clock's hands crawling toward evening. I took Max for a walk, longer than usual, down to the river path where the willows dipped their branches into the water. The air was crisp, carrying the faint rot of fallen leaves, and joggers nodded as they passed, earbuds in, worlds insulated. Normalcy everywhere but inside me. Back home the house greeted me with silence, but it felt watchful now, the walls absorbing my footsteps like they were measuring them. As dusk settled, painting the sky in bruised purples, I decided to investigate the vent properly, no more half measures. I rummaged through the garage for tools, a flashlight, a screwdriver, even the pry bar from my ex's old kit. The basement door resisted the key for a heartbeat, as if reluctant, but the bolt gave way. I flicked on the light and descended, the steps groaning under my weight. The air down here was thicker today, laced with that earthy tang, and Max hung back at the top, whining softly before retreating upstairs. Smart dog. The shelves looked undisturbed, the toolbox closed tight. I knelt by the far wall, the concrete cool against my knees. The vent grate was old, its slats warped from years of neglect, the cardboard flap yellowed and curling. I wedged the screwdriver under the edge and pried. Metal scraped against metal, a sound that echoed too loudly in the quiet. The grate popped free, clattering to the floor. Behind it, a narrow duct snaked into the wall, black and empty, as far as the beam of my flashlight reached. Dust bunnies and a few dead insects, nothing more. I shone the light deeper, the beam catching on something metallic, a loose screw maybe, or the glint of wiring from the old heating system. No voices, no hidden room, just the house's innards, forgotten and banal. Relief flickered, but it was short-lived. As I leaned in, a draft whispered out, cool and insistent, carrying that same murmur, faint at first, like radio static from a distant station. Every night. The door. I pulled back, heart thudding. It wasn't wind. The duct was sealed at the other end, or so the house plan said. I pressed my ear close again, the metal warming under my skin. The sound sharpened. Elena, come down. See. My name, clear as a breath on glass, I recoiled, flashlight shaking, the beam dancing wildly across the shelves. No source, no trick of acoustics, just the duct staring back like an eye. Upstairs I slammed the door harder than necessary, the lock clicking into place with finality. My hands trembled as I washed them at the sink, soap suds swirling down the drain like unraveling thoughts. Dinner was forgotten. I sipped water at the table, staring at the wood grain until patterns emerged, swirls that looked like faces, half-formed and pleading. The sun vanished completely, leaving the kitchen in twilight. I turned on the overhead light, its buzz a companion to the growing isolation. Willow Creek's streets were empty now, the neighbors tucked away behind drawn curtains, their lives unfolding in private rhythms. Mine felt exposed, peeled back layer by layer. Night deepened, the clock in the hall marking time with deliberate chimes. I didn't bother with the couch this time. Instead, I dragged a chair into the hallway, facing the basement door like a sentinel. Max settled nearby, his ears flicking at every creak from the settling house. The wine from last night sat untouched on the counter. I needed clarity, not haze. 2:15 glowed on my phone screen, propped against the wall. The air grew heavy, expectant, as if the whole suburb held its breath. Max shifted, a low rumble in his throat, not quite a growl. 2:17. Silence stretched, taut as a wire. No click, no scrape. I exhaled slowly, shoulders easing. Maybe the grate had been the key. Exposing the duct had silenced whatever echoed through it. 5 minutes passed. 10. The chair creaked as I leaned back, eyelids heavy. Relief turned to drowsiness, the kind that pulls you under despite the vigilance. But then, from behind the locked door, it came, not the latch, but a soft thump, muffled, like something shifting weight on the far side, followed by footsteps, faint, deliberate, pacing the concrete floor below. Not rushing, just moving. Back and forth, a slow rhythm that matched my pulse. I bolted upright, chair scraping against the hardwood. "Who's there?" The words escaped, sharp in the quiet, but no answer, just the pacing, steady now, circling closer to the stairs. Max was on his feet, hackles raised, staring at the door with unblinking eyes. The footsteps paused, then resumed, ascending 1 step, 2, stopping at the landing. Hovering. The air in the hallway cooled, a draft sneaking under the doorframe, brushing my bare feet. I reached for the knob, fingers hovering, every instinct screaming to unlock it, to confront whatever waited. But doubt paralyzed me. What if it wasn't footsteps? What if it was the house itself, bones creaking in the night, drawing me down to reveal what I'd overlooked? The pacing resumed, descending again, fading into the depths. Minutes ticked by, the sound looping in my ears even after it stopped. I didn't move until dawn's first light filtered through the front window, pale and unforgiving. The chair had left indents on my skin, a map of the night's vigil. Max licked my hand, urging me toward the kitchen, toward normalcy. But as I stood, legs numb, the basement door seemed to watch me back, solid. Silent, but no longer just a barrier. It was an invitation, pulling at the edges of my sanity, promising truths buried deeper than concrete. And in the quiet of that morning, with Willow Creek stirring awake outside, I wondered how much longer I could resist stepping through. The morning light crept in like an intruder, pale and hesitant, chasing the shadows from the hallway, but not the chill from my bones. I rose from the chair slowly, my neck stiff from the awkward angle, pins and needles prickling down my arms. Max followed me into the kitchen, his nails clicking softly on the linoleum, a reminder that at least one living thing shared this space without question. I filled his bowl with kibble, the routine motion grounding me as I stared out the window at Elm Street, stirring to life. Cars backed out of driveways, heading toward the highway or the office parks on the edge of town. Willow Creek pretended nothing had changed overnight, its facade of normalcy as solid as the colonials lining the block. But everything had. The footsteps, deliberate, unhurried, replayed in my mind. A loop I couldn't pause. Not the random creaks of settling wood, but something with intent, circling the basement like a shadow measuring its territory. I avoided the door as I made toast, buttering it mechanically, the knife scraping louder than necessary. No coffee today. My stomach twisted at the thought. Instead, I sipped water from a glass, watching the droplets condense on the sides, mirroring the sweat that had beaded on my forehead during the vigil. By 10, the fog had lifted completely, leaving the sky a crisp blue, the kind that mocked indoor unease. I needed to move, to reclaim the house before it claimed me. I started upstairs, stripping the bed and bundling the sheets into the washer, anything to fill the hours with purpose. The machine hummed to life in the laundry nook off the kitchen, its rhythm a counterpoint to the silence below. As it spun, I glanced at the basement door again, the lock's key dangling from its hook like a dare. No, not yet. I vacuumed the living room instead, the roar of the machine drowning out imagined echoes, sucking up dust bunnies from under the couch where Max liked to hide. The suburb outside buzzed faintly, Mrs. Harlan's radio drifting from her open window, tuned to the local station playing oldies from the 80s. Life persisting, one note at a time. Lunch came and went, a salad thrown together from wilting greens in the fridge, eaten standing at the counter. My phone buzzed once, a text from Tom at the realty agency praising the website mock-up I'd sent days ago. "Looks great, Elena. Let's schedule a call next week." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji, fingers hovering over the screen before adding nothing more. Sharing this with him, or anyone, felt impossible now. What words could capture footsteps that paced without a body, murmurs that knew my name? They'd suggest carbon monoxide or stress from the divorce lingering like a bad aftertaste. But I knew better. The house wasn't poisoning me. It was revealing itself layer by layer in the dead of night. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the bay window, warming the couch where I finally sat, a notebook in lap. I jotted notes, times, sounds, details from the library files, trying to map the mystery like one of my design projects. The Harlan name circled back. The carpenter who'd built the place in 1923, great-uncle to my neighbor, perhaps. No dark tales, but a footnote about unusual foundation work due to the river's shifting banks. Erosion, they called it. Houses sinking slowly into the earth, pulling secrets with them. I tore the page out, crumpling it, but the words stayed etched in my head. As evening approached, the light softened, gilding the oak tree out back in amber. I grilled chicken on the back porch, the sizzle and smoke a brief distraction, Max circling hopefully at my feet. We ate together, me at the picnic table, him from his bowl, watching fireflies wink in the gathering dusk. The neighborhood settled, porch lights flicking on, a distant dog's bark echoing down the street. Inside, the house waited. Its quiet not empty but expectant, like a held breath before confession. I couldn't ignore it forever. After dinner, dishes stacked in the sink, I fetched the flashlight and screwdriver again, steeling myself at the basement door. The key turned smoothly this time, the bolt retracting with a whisper. I opened it wide, the light from upstairs spilling down like a hesitant lifeline. Max stayed upstairs, curled on his bed as if drawing a line. I descended, the steps solid underfoot, the air below carrying that familiar mustiness, now laced with something sharper. Ozone, maybe, from an unseen storm. The vent grate lay where I'd left it, a jagged hole in the wall staring back. I shone the flashlight into the duct, the beam probing deeper than before. Dust motes swirled, disturbed, and there, halfway in, wedged against a bend, was a small object glinting. I reached in, arms straining, fingers brushing cool metal. It came free with a scrape, an old pocket watch, tarnished silver, its chain tangled in cobwebs. The face was cracked, hands frozen at 2:17. I turned it over, heart sinking as I read the inscription on the back. To Harlan from E. Time waits for no one. Harlan, my builder, but who's E? Elena? No, that was coincidence, a name from another era. The footsteps from last night flooded back, but now they made a twisted sense. Not invasion, but echo, vibrations from the river, the shifting ground, carrying sounds through the ducts like veins in the house's body. The murmurs, wind through cracks, shaped by my own fears into voices. My name a projection of isolation. The door opening, thermal expansion, the latch loosening in the cool hours, nudged by drafts from the unstable foundation. Logical, explainable. Relief should have come, a puzzle solved. But as I climbed the stairs, watch clutched in my palm, doubt twisted deeper, the house had chosen me, hadn't it? A woman alone, attuned to its sighs after years of silence in my marriage. The divorce had hollowed me out, made me sensitive to every creak, every whisper of neglect. Was this the revelation? The house mirroring my fractures, opening doors I'd sealed shut inside myself? I locked it behind me, the click final, but the watch's weight in my pocket felt like a heartbeat, sinking with the clock upstairs. Night fell heavy, the suburbs hum, fading to whispers. I placed the watch on the mantel, its frozen hands accusing under the lamp's glow. Max dozed by the fireplace, but I sat vigil again, this time in the armchair facing the hallway. 2:15. The air thickened, the grandfather clock ticking louder. 2:16. A faint tremor ran through the floor, subtle, like the river's pulse far below. 2:17. No footsteps, no murmurs, just silence, profound and listening. Then from the basement a soft sigh, not wind, but exhale, as if the house released a long-held breath. The door didn't move, locked tight, but in that moment I understood. It wasn't trying to scare me, it was inviting me to stay, to listen closer, to become part of its rhythm. The watch on the mantel ticked once, impossibly, its hands shifting to 2:18 before stopping again. I didn't flinch. Instead, a quiet acceptance settled, uneasy but complete. Willow Creek slept on outside, its secrets buried in the ordinary. Mine. They stirred just below the surface, waiting for the next night, the next click that might never come, or always would, in ways I could no longer ignore. In the days that followed, the house quieted. Or perhaps I did. Mornings brought routine, walks with Max along the river path where the water murmured without malice. Work flowed again, designs for local shops that felt vibrant against the subdued tones of my home. I even waved to Mrs. Harlan one afternoon, her roses blooming defiant in the fall chill. "Harlan built strong," she said, eyeing my porch. "Holds on to what matters." I nodded. The watch tucked away in a drawer, its inscription a private echo. Nights passed without incident, the clock's glow a companion rather than a countdown. But sometimes, in the hush before sleep, I'd hear it. A faint pacing, not in the basement, but in my thoughts. Circling, waiting, the door stayed shut, but the invitation lingered, subtle as a draft under the frame. And in Willow Creek, where houses whisper to those who listen, I wondered if I'd ever truly close it.